Please rise. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. Oh. All right, Cheryl, call the roll after you provide our town board member a pen.
Kim Connor.
Here.
Dennis Gagnon.
Here.
Peter Lewis.
Here.
Laura O'Connell. Here. Neil Tillman is not here. Heidi Wendell. Here. And Neil Zuckerman.
Here. All right, thank you very much. Welcome to the October meeting of the Philipstown Planning Board. We don't have a terribly full agenda this evening, but we do have one public scoping session we'll engage in. We'll start with the perfunctory approval of the minutes from September. Can I have a motion to approve them?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any additions, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions. All right, that's great. All right, Cheryl, we've got three, can we scoot down a bit so Cheryl can get in here?
Yep.
Thank you. You're a full-fledged member of this team, Cheryl. You need to be here. All right. Sorry. So let's just go through the correspondence, please, Cheryl.
To whom it may concern, this letter is to request the release of the cash performance bond dated 7/21/2006 in the amount of $25,000 as this project has been completed. Please see the enclosed copy of bond receipt if you need additional information. Sincerely, Stephen Pidala.
Great. And you don't have to read the second from Greg. So, Steve, any issues on this?
No, the issue was that they asked for the return of the bond, or release of the bond, and they had not submitted any proof that the work was done. We now have the proof that the work is done. The appropriate action for the board to take is to make a motion, adopt a resolution that the bond can be released. You'll advise the town board, and then the town board will actually release the bond.
Okay. Anything to add, anyone? Nothing? All right. Can I have a motion to release the bond, or direct the town board to release the bond, request the town board to release the bond?
To the town board, the bond can be released.
Yes, that.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. All right, the next topic, I've just asked Cheryl to briefly read this. This is related to Hudson Highland Reserve's zoning change request in front of the town board. I'll let Cheryl read a couple of very brief paragraphs around the zoning change. I'll ask Steve a question around it, and then we'll open it for discussion. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Be it enacted by the town board of the town of Philipstown as follows. The purpose of this local law is to promote the public health, safety, and welfare by amending Chapter 175 to the Town Code entitled Zoning, to amend the zoning map to change the zoning designation of certain real property to be more compatible with surrounding properties. Section 3, Amendment of Code. The Town of Philipstown Code, Chapter 175, Section 175-8, entitled Zoning Maps, is hereby amended to revise said zoning map by changing the zoning designation of a portion of the real property identified on the town tax map as Section 17, Block 1, Lot 76.122, from M to RR, consisting of approximately 11.1 acres total.
Okay, so look, just to be clear again, this is the zoning change that's been proposed by the applicant for Hudson Islands Reserve. We've completed secret for them. It is now in front of the town board to make a zoning change, and they'll come back to us for site plan approval. And we've, as you know, we all voted on that. I think our vote was 5-2 on that motion. So just, my one question for Steve is, Steve, can you just advise us, this is the first time, at least in my tenure on this board, we've been asked by the town board to opine on a zoning change for a matter that is effectively in front of us at the same time. So can you just advise us about whether we even have standing or whether it's appropriate for us to comment on it?
Yes, you do have standing. It is appropriate for you to comment on it. What's happening here, I'm sure the board recalls, but just by way of recap, is there's a small portion, about 11 acres, of the Hudson Highland Reserve property, which is zoned M, permits soil mining. And all the surrounding property is zoned RR, rural residential. And the way that density and density conservation subdivision density bonuses are calculated is based upon the amount of residential land that's in the property in the subdivision. So this property being zoned M currently, it isn't counted toward the density calculation. If the zoning is changed by the town board, then it will be counted in it. The bottom line effect of that is that if the zoning change is granted, they can keep the 24 lots that they currently are proposing, dwellings, I should say, for the subdivision. If the town board denies the zoning change, then they have to reduce the number of dwellings to 22. The reason it's before this board is zoning change applications come before you for review and report, chiefly in regard to development issues. If the zoning change would impact adversely, or even positively, I guess, the potential development of the property, you should report to the board that if you make the zoning change, there's going to be a problem because either the density will be too much, or it will require, for example, central water or central sewer, or perhaps there's access issues with it. And if you allow the zoning change to allow commercial development, there's no place for trucks to come. Whatever the issue may be that you see as a development issue with the zoning change. Now, in this particular instance, the board's already adopted a secret finding statement saying that, because the zoning change was part of the EIS on this, that there will be no significant environmental impacts from it. So a lot of what you might talk about in terms of developmental issues is really pretty much off the board. Everybody knows what the development is proposed as, and you pretty much know what the impacts will be. If you were to come up with some other issue, either positive or negative, in terms of how this zoning change might affect development of the property, it would be appropriate to comment on it. If you don't have any such issue, you could either say this is a legislative determination, the board has no comment, or you could just have no comment at all. You're not required to respond. So that's pretty much where you are procedurally with this. So it's before you. If you have some issue that the zoning change might impact with the development of the land, you're free to comment on it. If you feel that everything's been said in the finding statement, then again, you can either say nothing or just say it's a legislative determination.
Okay. So I just want to get the sentiment of the board if people feel like there's a need to comment.
I have a question for
Please.
Steve. So Steve, how, just out of curiosity, like, how is this not spot zoning?
Well, spot zoning is zoning change which is contrary to the comprehensive plan. It isn't necessarily zoning that affects only one piece of property. If the zoning change affects one piece of property, but it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, then it is not spot zoning. Certainly your comprehensive plan doesn't contemplate mining going on in this property, particularly as it's being developed residentially and it's surrounded by RR properties. So this clearly would not be spot zoning.
And was this the only piece of the Hudson Highlands Reserve that was designated M? I thought the whole thing was M.
No, it's almost all RR except for one portion which is already developed that's zoned HC, right, Ron?
I don't recall.
I'm pretty sure it's HC, one little part, but that's already developed. Everything else is RR.
Okay.
Other questions? Oh, sorry. Other questions of Steve before we get to that question of whether we, no? All right, I'll just maybe take a sign of hands. If people want to comment on this besides the vote we've already had on SECRA? Please.
I'm opposed to changing the zoning for the reasons that I opposed the project in the prior votes. I don't think it's a conservation subdivision. I think the developer has already basically circumvented the town's desire in passing the conservation subdivision, whether they're, I understand that the board has already found that they technically were not in violation, but I think for the town to extend this change in the zoning after there's already been an obvious circumvention of the desire of the town to reduce the number of units on the property and conserve more land, or require the developer to comply with a conventional subdivision approach, which would have led to less units on the property, is just one more, problem that's been presented by this developer. So for that reason, I would oppose the zoning change. I think that the developer should accommodate the town's desire to either have a real conservation subdivision or have a conventional subdivision with fewer units, for the reasons I've already stated in the prior votes.
thank you. Steve, can I ask, can board members submit can we send individual comments, or do we need to have a vote with a collective viewpoint?
Well,
With
of
a
course,
majority view?
the board is free as individual members to send whatever they want to the town board. The town board will be holding a public hearing on this, and they can comment. This, however, is for review and report by the entire board, so you're going to need to reach a consensus. I'm aware of what Heidi's objections were in regard to the EIS, or excuse me, the finding statement earlier, and I can incorporate them, just saying that they were her objections into a letter, unless other board members have something they'd like to say. I can tell you, however, that being opposed to a project or feeling that it's not consistent with zoning is not really what the town board's looking for in terms of a comment here. They're really looking for development issues. I'm sure they'll consider her comment, but I don't think it's gonna be the type of thing that affects the vote ultimately, because
Let me just ask, would anyone like to sign on to Heidi's comments as something, okay, Peter would like to be part of that. Anyone else? Other board members who are not signing on, does anyone want to make a comment of any kind? No? No, and I do not either. I believe our secret commentary will stand. So if it's okay, I wouldn't mind if you would capture what Heidi and Peter are collectively saying, which is consistent with what you said at the time of the vote. And we can call it if you will, a minority report, no pun intended, from the movie.
it's not the case that everybody, feels the same. There's nothing wrong with the report letter saying some felt this way, some felt another, and that was the report they decided to send over. But if that's what the board's desire is, I'll send over a report that says, the majority of the board has no comment other than what appears in the finding statement. Two of the members, Peter?
Two.
Or
Peter.
two of the board
Peter and
members
Heidi.
stand by the objections raised during the course of review of the EIS, and the board can take it from there, I think.
Great. Any other comments on this topic? Okay, thank you, Heidi, for raising that. All right, we're gonna move into our public scoping session. I guess maybe we should first get the list from outside. If anyone is here to comment on the public scoping for the Garrison Golf Course / Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, please sign in now, if you haven't had a chance to sign in. If you have signed in, well, Cheryl's going to call you up here. A couple ground rules. So the purpose of this will be to comment on this draft scoping that the applicant has provided, in which this board has provided some input to through our quote-unquote punch list at the last session. The public comments will be tied to commentary. We'll ask your comments to be tied to commentary around the piece of areas that we've asked them to further investigate. We're not entertaining a repeat of our previous public sessions where we're going to tell us what your pros and cons are of the project. Regardless of what your views are, pro or con, we do not, that's not the purpose tonight. Tonight's about additional information that we would like tied to the environmental impact statement. Is that clear? Oh, you don't have to nod. That is what's happening. So I don't know if you guys want to make a presentation, but it's not necessary, but if you have something to say, be my guest.
Is this on? Thanks. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public. My name is Adam Stallero. I'm an attorney with Sy, Paget, and Rizal, the environmental counsel to the project. With me here tonight are David Roberts, who's the managing director of Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival, and Jan Johannesson, who's the lead environmental consultant with Kellard Sessions, and Glenn Watson of Brady Watson, who's the project engineer.
No introduction, sir.
No, he didn't. It's true. It's true. So my clients, Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival and Garrison Properties LLC, are applying to the planning board for subdivision approval, site plan approval, and a special permit from the planning board, which is also serving as the lead agency for environmental review of the project under SECRA. Just to give a brief background on Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival and the project, I know many of you are familiar with the project, so I will keep this brief. Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival was founded in 1987. It's a critically acclaimed professional nonprofit theater company. For 33 years, the festival was at Boscobel House and Gardens, also in Philipstown, and HVSF is now proposing a permanent home at the Garrison on Route 9 between Phillips Brook Road and Snake Hill Road on the former Garrison Golf Club property. HVSS operated at the Garrison this summer very successfully. and we were able to capture real-world data on traffic, noise, and other potential impacts through the operation of the theater this summer. So the proposed project will be built in phases over 30 years and contains the following key elements: an application to the town board to amend the underlying zoning districts to allow the uses that are proposed by HVSF, a subdivision of the property of the 142 main parcel of the property into 3 individual lots. This would result in an approximately 97-acre lot to be owned and developed by HVSF, a 27.5-acre private residential lot to be retained by Garrison Properties, the current owner, and a 17-acre lot to be conveyed to Hudson Highlands Land Trust to be preserved for conservation purposes. In addition, I'd like to note that the 97-acre parcel that is going to Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival will be subjected to a recorded declaration that will ensure that the parcel will only be used for not-for-profit cultural use envisioned and proposed by the festival. The centerpiece of the project is a 500-seat open-air theater, which includes a back-of-house structure, rehearsal space, associated facilities, and administrative space. The theater would be the first purpose-built theater in the United States to achieve a LEED Platinum designation. In addition to the theater, the project includes picnic lawns, gardens, and meadows. HVSF envisions that the public will be able to continue to use the property for picnicking as it has in the past, and while restoring and developing native meadows in place of the prior golf course use. The project also includes artist and guest lodging and the continuation of the existing restaurant and banquet hall with a reduction of total seats to 200, the construction of 1 single-family dwelling on the 27-acre parcel, a total of 521 total parking spaces, traffic improvements, and associated infrastructure and site improvements. Turning to SECRA review, this is a Type 1 action under SECRA. Between 2021 and 2022, the applicants presented a full environmental assessment form, over 1,000 pages, reviewed by the planning board with many public comments and hours of discussion. In July 2022, the planning board issued a positive declaration in which the planning board determined that it would be beneficial to continue studying the potential environmental impacts of the project through an EIS, or environmental impact statement. As part of the positive declaration, the planning board went through each SECRA issue area to determine what, if any, additional study was needed in the EIS. Some issue areas like land use, geology, and stormwater, the planning board determined that those areas had been fully studied in the EAF. 7 issue areas were advanced for study in the draft EIS, and those are part of the draft scope. And they include vegetation and wildlife, wetlands and watercourses, utilities, traffic, transportation, and parking, visual resources and community character, noise, and human health. For each of these issue areas, the draft EIS will compare the potential environmental impacts of the project against a no-action alternative, which is an evaluation of the changes that were likely to occur on the property in the reasonably foreseeable future if the project was not built. So in this case, the no-action alternative is the full build-out of the property as allowed by the current zoning, which includes a 40-room hotel and spa. We had detailed input from the planning board and from AKRF about specific analyses that should be included in the draft EIS for each issue area. There have been some design changes to the project since the positive declaration over the summer. These 2 significant changes are first related to the design of the theater itself. So the design that was previously proposed was a white tent-like structure. That's been replaced by a lower profile theater building, as you can see in this picture. That theater design is low to the ground. It echoes the sort of ridge lines around it and behind it, and it'll be surrounded by 3 sides, on 3 sides by vegetative screening. The second significant change is to the entrance to the property. The previous design had proposed putting a new span bridge and a new entrance off Snake Hill Road. That access has been eliminated, and the current design that we're proposing in the draft EIS uses the existing entrance at Snake Hill Road as it was this summer for one-way ingress and egress out of the property. So that option eliminates the concern that had been raised about potential wetland impacts associated with the new bridge. So with that, thank you to the board, and we look forward to working with the board to finalize a scope for the EIS and to prepare the draft.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, so Cheryl, how many speakers do we have?
4 people that signed in on both sheets.
Okay. We're going to ask you, as I said, Marcy would like to make sure when you come up, you state your name, spell your name, apparently, right, Marcy? You want the name spelled? Anything else you'd like? That's it? Okay. Are you writing this down, what I'm saying about you? Are you in, it's very meta of you to be in your own minutes. Okay, funny. Okay, so, and we've stated publicly we're going to do a 3-minute time limit this time as opposed to the unlimited time we did in the public sessions. So, Cheryl, who's the first person?
Roger Lipsy. Okay. Jeffrey Anzavino.
Sir, you want to come to the microphone here? Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Could you state your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thing for
Oh,
Marcy.
my name is Jeffrey Anzavino, Director of Land Use Advocacy for Scenic Hudson. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. Scenic Hudson fights threats to the river and the valley's natural resources and seeks to advance projects consistent with principles in our planning guide, Revitalizing Hudson Riverfronts. And the Scenic Hudson Land Trust preserves land and farms and creates parks that connect people with the inspirational power of the Hudson River. We review many projects throughout the valley during secret processes and add our voice to those community members for consideration by planning boards and other lead agencies. Given the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival's significance to the community, we felt it important to take a hard look at the project and the scope in the context of the Planning Board's decision to issue a positive declaration. Based on our staff review of the draft scope, a review of public comments, and a site visit, we offer the following comments. We believe that the proposed zoning amendments to allow the theater and ancillary buildings will provide long-term benefits by averting the prospect of a residential subdivision or more impactful development of the property. About 75 acres to be conveyed to the Hudson Highlands Land Trust, and the applicant proposes restoring 8 acres of former fairways, greens, and trees into native meadows. This will protect existing habitat and even provide new habitat for flora and fauna. Nearly 100 acres of the site will be subjected to a recorded declaration to ensure that the land will only be used for not-for-profit cultural and conservation uses. To ensure these uses in perpetuity, the Scenic Hudson Land Trust has agreed to accept a reversionary interest in this portion of the site. This provides that the Scenic Hudson Land Trust will have the right to take ownership of these lands, again for conservation purposes, should the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival ever dissolve or become insolvent and a suitable successor is not found to use the land consistent with the recorded restrictions. Finally, in response to community concerns about the project's visibility, the applicant, to its credit, has redesigned the performance space, once planned as a large white tent, as a lower stone and timber open-air pavilion whose roof mimics and blends with the adjacent hills. We believe this additional significant improvement will ensure that no adverse visual impacts will result from the vantage points nearby or from afar, including Route 9, other adjacent roads, parks, and public places such as Storm King Mountain and the Hudson River itself. In summary, we believe the applicant has been responsive to the community and the Planning Board concerns, and for these reasons, Scenic Hudson supports the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival's secret scope as proposed, as well as its plan to establish a permanent home at the Garrison. We hope that the Planning Board, community, and applicant will continue to work together to see this project through to fruition. Thank you very much.
So just going forward, I know we don't have that many speakers, but please comment on the scope. The only thing the gentleman talked about the scope was that he agreed with the scope. So let's focus on the scope tonight, not whether we like the project or we don't like the project. That's not what tonight's about. So thank you for your comments, but whoever is next, let's please focus on the scope. I think we caught that part. Okay.
Nat Prentice?
I'm counting on you, Nat, to focus on the scope. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling good about it.
You got it. So that's Nathaniel Prentice. Prentice, Prentice, that kind. I need to make a disclosure up front. I've come in my capacity as associated with the comprehensive plan, but I am and have been a director of the Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival for the better part of 20 years. So I'm very familiar with what the past and the future. But that's not what brings me here. What brings me here tonight is a section of the scoping document. I've written it here so Cheryl will know what I'm talking about. It's that part of the document that addresses the issues of public need and consistency, and this is where I would like to make a comment. Consistency with the goals of the town as outlined in the town's comprehensive plan. Happens to be on page 5. Section D, Roman numeral 3, subsection C, 2, page 5. So this is really, all I really want to do is just make a comment about how consistency, looking at the comprehensive plan, how difficult that may be to measure, because one person's view of what's consistent with the comprehensive plan may very well differ with someone else's view of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan presents goals that are intended to be broad and aspirational. These goals and the strategies and the action items that go with them neither permit nor deny anything specific. Like beauty, what the plan says is in the eye of the beholder. So that's really all I wanted to say. I just think that I think it's a noble aspiration to make this application be in line with be consistent with the comprehensive plan. But as I said, the comprehensive plan is written very broadly, and it will be Bob Flaherty's view of it will be different than mine. I happen to be a supporter, but everybody else is entitled to their own. So consistency is just a difficult matter, in my view, to get right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Matt. Cheryl, who's next?
Thank you. Mr. Mahon? Mahon?
Yes, I think I would reserve any comments. I don't have anything
Okay.
to say.
Okay. All right, anyone else who's here to want to speak on the scoping? All right, please, just state and spell your name, sir, and we'll go from there.
Hi, James Hartford, Hartford, 5 Furnace Street, Cold Spring, New York. I'm a local architect. I specialize in sustainability. I've done quite a few LEED projects. You know my work in Passive House. And I have to say that the objectives of meeting LEED Platinum is incredibly challenging. It absolutely relates to the scoping of the comprehensive plan, and Philipstown fights dirty. It is completely consistent with everything that we aspire to as a community. I also just want to point out that it's going to be a beautiful project, and we should embrace this. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, anyone else here to talk about the scoping document? No? We have one letter that at least I saw that if Cheryl can just, you don't have to read it, but you can provide to the applicants from Mr. Brenner, who I think I saw walk in. There it is. Do you want to say it publicly, or is it your letter? You want to just leave that? Whatever you want to do. Okay.
Well, I missed the beginning. Jay Brenner, 29 Snake Hill Road, Brenner. I missed the beginning of the meeting.
We're asking you to opine on the scope, which I think your letter covers.
Okay.
So
Okay. My biggest
confine your
concern.
comments to the scope about what you want the study to be focused
My
on.
biggest concern is the sound pollution. That they should be doing a sound check where they broadcast shows and different things that they might have recorded and broadcast from where they propose to put their new theater, and then do sound testing in the neighborhood and in the different homes that it might be affecting. So that's what my letter is noted. The other part of that letter is the traffic light. I've just recently joined the fire department in Garrison and spoke to the chief, and he thinks that would be a disaster as far as putting a traffic light there, but
Again, I'm trying so hard to
Right.
get us folks in the scope.
Okay.
But if you're asking for more study to be done of that light, I think that's
Yes.
a legitimate, that would be on par for what we're talking about tonight. Thank you, sir, and thank you for joining the fire department. 663 Old Albany Post Road is my address. Keep it top of mind. Yeah, exactly. All right, any more public speakers? Anyone going once, going twice? Okay, so I know, Aaron, you're suggesting we keep the scoping hearing open until the 27th of October, so we can receive written comments until then? Is that what you're proposing?
The comment period will remain open until the 27th. That's what you advertised in the notice. That's what the applicant's revised scope that was put online says in it. So, yeah, I would recommend you keep that open for written comments to come in. That's one more week from today. And then after that, they can work on a final scope, submit that by the deadline for the November meeting. And at the November meeting, we can work on adopting a final version.
Steve, did you want to add from that?
I'm sorry, my memory's failing me. It was agreed that we were extending the 60-day period to cover November. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then, no, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Board members, any questions at this point? Peter?
I just have a few
You comment on this?
desires on the scope.
Let me just pause you for a second. Just procedurally, what? For me? Okay, yeah. Okay. So just procedurally, can board members comment on the scoping at this point? Is that okay?
This is the time to do that.
Okay, great. That's foiled then. All right, go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Just to add to the scope, which is completely thorough to begin with. Part A, Vegetation and Wildlife, 1A2, that there's make sure that there's a full description of the landscape, and as Shakespeare envisions it, and also its maintenance. Just to make sure that that's a nice, thorough overview. That's on page 6. Page 8, running into page 9.
Slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Just make sure Aaron, are you capturing these things?
Yeah, stenographer's getting it. The video will be good.
Peter, you didn't spell your name for Marcy.
Oh, Lewis.
All right, keep going.
Let's see. Page 8, running into page 9. This is potential impacts of water. We're on the water question. Simply whether or not there's a possibility of discussing recharge, which may be something that is beyond the limits of climatology and meteorology these days. So, but if there is any way that we can talk about recharge of the aquifer relative to the groundwater use, that would be great if we could have that. And finally, because we talked in the scoping session about, on page 4, about clarity, I just wanted to go to page 10, and this is going to be D at the top of page 10. The red addition to that, pass by and other trip credit traffic volumes will be clearly presented. To me, I'm clueless as to what that means.
Well, that's an Aaron edit, I believe.
So I would just like to add, to make that a little more clear to the everyday person who might not be traffic savvy. And that's all I have to say.
Do you want to explain it?
Peter, what page you're talking about? Page 10?
Page 10.
The edit there?
And
Pass
then
by
we,
other trip credits? Okay.
I'm sorry, can't find page 10.
see
D,
it. Yeah,
where it
so this
says
was-
pass by and other trip credit traffic volumes. I just didn't have any idea what that meant. So I just wanted that to be clarified for the public and for myself.
You can do that. It was my colleagues in traffic suggestion. So between now and the comment period ending, we can clean that up a little bit. We can provide some definitions and
Fine
more
with me.
explanation. No problem.
Thank you.
Other board members, comments on the scope? Dennis, no. Laura, Heidi, anything? Kim? So I have one, and I think I'll say this with, this pun will be intended. I will amplify what Mr. Brenner said, and I've had a couple of other people approach me over the last few weeks in advance of this. I think under noise, I think the concern is not about what Shakespeare will do. Part of this site plan approval and this process will be, of course, about what anyone who would one day have this property. And I think there were legitimate questions raised. I remember Alice Smith in particular, who was a local Sony music exec, talking about one day if this place works, maybe there'll be a concert, and maybe there'll be many concerts. And so that's not a comment about Shakespeare's usage, that's a comment about the physical property that could one day be in someone else's hands, or it could be used by different management that may think it's not a bad idea. And so therefore, I do think having, because this noise study is about using, I believe, existing completed evaluations. I do think there is legitimacy to testing music at different levels at the same, I forget the name of the term, but the points around the property, I think there were 7 where we determined, but I don't think we were testing for music at different levels, and I do think that's a legitimate expectation of what could be used and a worthy piece of information to be had. So I'll amplify those previous remarks. Aaron, you seem confused.
I have a thought, and maybe Steve can weigh in, but I think maybe if they're trying to change the zoning to allow this specific use for theater, and they're going to have this declaration that they're talking about, if that does change, correct me if I'm wrong, wouldn't they need to come back for an amendment again, and they would go through seeker again, and you can look at it then?
Well, they would, but I don't know that the proposed uses in the zoning change or even the proposed uses for Shakespeare are limited to spoken words in the play and how much background music there might be. So it's the type of thing I'd like to see looked at in SECRA as far as that goes. How far they go with the testing's another matter. We're going to have to hash that out.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, so barring any more comment, you want to say something, Heidi?
I was just wondering if it would be possible to put a condition on any approval that there couldn't be concerts with decibels over a certain, I mean, in other words, if it's not just going to be Shakespeare, but rather there could be concerts of other kinds that could have greater amplification. And if that's a possibility under the current, project, why couldn't we just put some kind of condition that they can't do that?
I'm not, that may be possible. I think at this point, we're determining.
I know, but I'm
That's a
just,
good
I'm
solution.
throwing that out for the future.
Future.
Like, I mean, that's not part of the scoping, but I'm just saying, if that's, we've heard from a lot of people that that's a concern, and maybe down the road, there could be.
Yeah, it's possible if they determine that in fact, at some level, it could be disruptive, we could then use that level to then create a limit. But I think that's not for this moment to be. I hear your
Understood. I'm
point.
just putting it
And
that out.
it's a very smart point. Others? Dennis?
I'm curious, you had your first season the first season this past summer. Were there any complaints from the community for noise?
There were none. There were none that were reported to us.
How about traffic or anything like that?
Sir, could you use the mic just for the public? Thank you.
I am David Roberts. I'm the interim managing director of the festival. And upon closing of this season, public commentary and feedback that we got, we had no noise complaints.
Or traffic?
No traffic complaints.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? On the scope? Okay, hearing none, we'll keep it open and move on, right? We've got the date set.
Open for comment, written comments.
We don't need a motion for that, do we?
It probably would be best. I know it was written in the notice, but let's just make it formal.
But what are we moving on?
Moving that the scoping session is closed except for submission of written comments up to and including October 27th.
Okay. Anyone want to second that? Heidi?
Second.
Second, Peter. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Great. All right, great. Thank you very much. Okay, Kingsley Tree, we've got a memo from our town highway soup. We've got Glenn, who has sent us a letter related to that letter. Maybe, Ron, you want to just peruse us through the commentary about that and the actions we could be entertaining at this point.
Certainly. Board conducted a public hearing on the application last month.
Let's just wait. Let's wait for all the, guys, can you, yeah, just let's wait 30 seconds for all the spectators to deplane. And Marcy's leaving too. We're gonna miss you, Marcy. Hardly knew you. Good night, Jan. Good night, Glenn.
Don't let him talk in the hallway.
Yeah, no talking in the hallways. You guys can go downstairs. All right, Ron, over to you.
Okay, Planning Board had a public hearing on the application a month ago. The significant concern that was raised by the public at that time concerned the location of the driveway being directly opposite Mountain Brook Drive. The board wisely, I think, then referred it to the highway superintendent for comment, since the highway superintendent ultimately is obligated to issue a driveway permit for any proposed access onto town roads. He has since responded, and based on his own site analysis, it's his recommendation that the driveway be kept at that location. To address concerns of the public, he wondered if the town board would be willing to consider three-way stop signs at that intersection to control movements through that intersection, which would also control activities at this proposed commercial site. So he does not recommend that the driveway be relocated. It has been suggested or recommended by the public. Revised plans have come in, a revised EAF has come in. The revised plans leave the driveway in the same location that was presented at the public hearing. The EAF that's been submitted has addressed prior comments raised by board members. So if the planning board is otherwise disposed to accept the recommendations of the highway superintendent, you might wish to consider directing the resolutions be prepared for the next meeting.
Steve, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Ron covered it very well.
Okay, board members' comments, questions on that?
Can I ask, Jason, those are your drawings, right? I'd just like to see, I'd like to see on the drawing, sorry, where the driveway exactly is, because it seems to me like that it's not dead center with Mountain Brook Drive. Is that Mountain Brook Drive? See how there's sort of a wide, the road is wide and the driveway is narrow, and it's slightly to the south of the intersection so that they don't really line up. Is there a reason for that? Is that because of the septic?
That's because of the septic system and because of the utility pole that's present.
There's a utility pole there.
And more so the septic, really.
Yeah, because, you know, that one of the things that was brought up was where Route 9 and the Fishkill Road and the commercial site that's at that intersection, where that is and how that doesn't line up perfectly either, and that is something that is confusing to drivers. So I don't know if there's a way to, if that matters, you know, if there's analysis that shows that it doesn't really matter, you know, with the three-way stop or whatever, but it just, the fact that it's off-center to me is a little concerning. Is there any way that you can, some places we have septic underneath the parking area, don't we? Doesn't that, it's not ideal.
Be avoided wherever possible.
Okay, so where we have it, it's where it's already been existing, because we, okay.
And again, you gotta acknowledge the extent of traffic that's expected to emanate from the site, both entering in the morning from employees and leaving the site right after that time. And then they're essentially gone all day, and then they'll come in the afternoon.
I mean, I would say that this is a little bit different than, although valid, it's a little bit different than the gas station where you have the public regularly using that driveway.
Thank you, Bob.
It's a lot busier
Right,
than what we're going to have here.
right. And so if there were stop signs, where would they be?
There'd be stop signs at both approaches to Mountain Brook Drive along Old Albany Post Road North.
So not right here, like, where, just, can you point to where they might be?
I mean, I really haven't considered I would say that they would be here on Mountain Brook Drive and here on the southbound, and here on the northbound. So, just south of our entrance, and approximately here, and a stop bar here.
What's a stop bar?
That's the painted line.
Oh, it's just a paint, it's not like
the
a
white.
physical thing it's not a rumble strip or, yeah, okay,
Like painted line.
okay.
No, there's no traffic control there.
No. So the highway superintendent had merely recommended it in response to public comment, but he's not prepared to move it forward unless the town board gives him directive that they would support that.
I believe there was other recommendations too, like bus stop, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the whole intent of the stop signs is to control traffic through that intersection. The buses would have to respond, any traffic on that roadway would have to respond to those stop signs.
That's the only recommendation.
Right.
He's saying that the stop sign will be helpful for a bus stop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he just, that's all he's suggesting, is install stop signs, painted stop bars on all approaches to the Mountain Brook Road intersection. Such traffic control measures should serve to create a safer environment for all users. It could also establish a safe, you're suggesting it also could establish a safe location. Yeah, that's the point, of school bus pickups and drop-offs. That's with the stop sign. Okay, other comments? Laura?
So I just have two questions. So one, more concerns and questions. So one is, I read the letter. My concern is that, we're talking about traffic for Kinsley is at the same time as drop-off and pickup for the buses. So you're gonna get it's all around the same time, right? Because if I understand correctly, buses are around 6 and 7 because there's 2 pickups in the morning and 2 pickups in the afternoon, or drop-offs in the afternoon. So that's one. The other thing is that my question is, in the drawing that we have here, it's not like, it's almost like half approached, if you know what I mean. Meaning I would make the driveway or the entrance to the Kingsley location more intentional. I don't think there's a way that if you put in 3 stop signs, that unless there is someone who is going to manage that stop sign, that people aren't going to just kind of coast through a stop sign. So I don't think that it's going to mitigate any of the issues with regard to the buses. So my question is that is there any way for us to actually relocate the driveway so it is actually much more intentionally removed off of that intersection, so that it really makes a big distinction between where that intersection is to then where the entrance is.
Laura, could you, it would help me if you would point on that map, because when you say intentional, I'm not sure I understand
Like
exactly.
moving it south, is that south? Yeah, moving it more south.
But
right?
wasn't that
So-
what we proposed?
No,
I mean,
That's what Kim proposed.
Yeah,
And that's a
And-
line of sight problem.
right, and so my question is that it's like, so we've gotten now the letter,
Yes.
and instead of saying like moving the driveway, we're gonna add in 3 stop signs. I'm not sure that the stop signs is gonna mitigate the problem, considering the fact that the traffic that they're proposing is at the exact same time as the buses, and there's gonna be consistent traffic throughout that. And unless the stop signs are managed and kind of policed,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen. And so why are we not actually asking them to just look at another potential study to just see how far south we can push that driveway?
If I could speak to that, I was out with the highway superintendent when he inspected the property. He did look at locations to the south. His issue was that as you move off the Mountain Brook intersection, you reduce available sight distance, and that was a concern to him. So he felt the best location to maximize sight distance would be to leave it at that intersection.
That's unfortunately what the paragraph says that he's written, so I don't know what we do about that. We don't control stop signs or lights. You can do stop signs, and lights are, for a road like this, lights would be whose purview?
You wouldn't hit the warrants that justify a light.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, so,
Neil?
yeah,
I
please.
was just gonna say, one thing that maybe could be done is to add, I don't know if this would be effective, but you could add one of those, or several of those signs that show children, you know, an image of children crossing, and so it's very apparent that cars really do need to stop, because there may be children, you know, crossing there. Maybe something like that to make it more than just a stoplight, but rather kind of alert a driver that, you know, it's more than a stoplight, it's also like a potential real hazard in the sense of children crossing. Bus stop, whatever. Maybe there's a sign that says bus stop, I don't know, school bus stop.
What about speed signs and reducing the speed of the zone?
I think that there's a town-wide speed limit that's just implicit. They don't post that on town roads typically.
I know, but we're all trying to spitball here, how we balance property rights with community rights, and I think there is what's that? Go ahead.
Well, you know, the traffic we're talking about is the traffic between the people who are driving the trucks out of the business
Yes.
and the people who live on the road who are dropping their children off, presumably. You know, obviously not everybody has children. That's a pretty small number. It's not like this is a commercial site where there are going to be a lot of clients coming in, because that isn't the way it works. So I don't know if that's meaningful to, you know, increase signage, because it's just the same, it's going to be the same people every day. So I don't know. I don't know if that doesn't help anything, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, look, what I'm trying to do in this part of the conversation is identify what are the levers available. It seems that Adam is suggesting stop signs, and Heidi is augmenting that with signage. I heard someone mention rumble. Go ahead.
If I may, I don't think it was the intention of the highway super for us to incorporate signage as mitigation. I believe it was up to, he was leaving it up to the community members to petition the town board for that.
No, he's very clear. It says he says that literally, yes. What I'm trying to do is, this board is charged with determining whether things can work in an area. And Kim is suggesting maybe the population's of a size where we don't have to do things. I know I sat here and heard a significant numbers of the members of the public of the area say real concerns. And I understand the mitigation that they had proposed to move south is one that superintendent doesn't think is beneficial given the sightline. So I frankly don't know what to do.
Does having a fixed bus stop help? You know, like if there were a very specific, bus stop that,
Right.
I'm not exactly sure where the bus stops.
I would think the bus goes all the way up that road. I mean, typically today, it's almost, wherever you live, the bus stops almost right in front of your house anymore.
yeah.
So that's what I see in my, where I live. So, I mean, I don't know.
Well, it says here the school buses stop at the Mountain Brook intersection. That is what it says, which is the area at the intersection.
So they don't go up the hill, like, if the,
They may, it just,
right.
Very large
That they could turn around on. And is it plowed is it a public road?
Yeah.
It's public road, so it's plowed in the winter and stuff like that. So,
I would be surprised if the bus doesn't go up there.
so it seems to me like, what if the departure from the bus happened on Mountain Brook Road? So then there would be no concern about any of the trucks coming in contact with the bus at that, when it stopped letting children off.
But don't forget, if a bus stops, they have a stop sign, and it's a law that you cannot pass a bus when it
Yes.
stops.
Right.
It's the same.
Right.
No one, anybody can do what they want to do.
Right.
There are those laws in effect today.
All right, so
But I mean,
Jason-
just to give comfort to the people who live on the road, if it were some way to remove the bus stop from a place where it could potentially have the impact, if that's the concern. I don't know.
Dennis, go ahead.
Well, just as a point, Bob, on East Mountain Road South and Esselborn, the bus stops there. The kids who live on Esselborn, walk the length of Esselborn to, as far as I know, to Crest Road. So
the kids walk uphill both ways?
both ways.
So-
For miles.
Dennis, you're spoken like a guy whose kids are
And
grown.
the cars line up. No, I was lucky. They picked them up right in front of my doorway.
All right, others? Laura.
So I guess to Kim's point, like, who determines
Yes.
the bus stop?
Yes.
Because I agree with Kim, if we can move the bus stop away from the intersection, I mean, it alleviates the stress point.
Yes. Please.
So the board has identified an issue with the site plan application, particularly traffic and traffic safety. And it's the applicant's obligation to address that concern to the board's satisfaction so that it can get its land use approval. The board can't require the applicant to make off-site improvements. That's not allowed. So you can't say you have to dedicate stop signs or you have to, get the bus stop moved or what have you. But what you can say to the applicant is, listen, the number of vehicle trips you have coming in the morning when there are children on that street is unsafe, and unless you come up with some way of addressing it, the condition we're going to impose, the board is going to impose, is we're going to limit the number of vehicle trips that can go in and out of the property at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8:30 or what have you. You may not like that condition because it restricts the amount of people you can have coming in and out. So in order to avoid it, you would come up with a mitigation measure of your own. Maybe you do offer dedication of voluntarily, stop signs, or you go and you get the bus station, the bus stop moved by the school district on your own. But it's the applicant's obligation to come back to the board and say, this is how I'm going to address the traffic safety issues that you have identified. The board can't just throw up its hands and say, well, what we thought would work didn't work. I guess it's going to be, an issue for the people in the neighborhood.
I'm absolutely, as the board chair, not suggesting that we're going to throw our hands up and then let the laissez-faire occur. In fact, I think what you're suggesting is, I think what Laura's asking is, how do we help Jason and his client figure out who to go to get the bus stop moved or add stop signs and or what other mitigations? Because I don't think we want to leave you with a problem, but we certainly want to help you, guide you to the solution.
And that's fine, and if that's the way the board looks at it, and certainly helping applicants is within the purview of the board, but I don't want the board to feel that it has to come up with a fix for this. It's really the applicant's obligation. So these are all great ideas and good things to throw out, but at the end of the day, if there's an off-site fix, it's for them to come up with an offer, and if not, and they won't do anything, then the board's going to have to impose conditions of its own to mitigate the use of the property.
I think the sentiment of the board is fairly clear from this conversation that we would like a solution to this problem. And one has been posed by Adam, another one, I forget who said it, maybe it was Kim, that maybe we move the stop itself, but I think we do need a solution to this because at least I, for one, would not feel comfortable moving forward at this point. And we can do a straw poll if people would like to have them come back to us with a better answer. Can I have a show of hands on that? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. All right, so that's pretty clear.
It's still a little vague because we don't know where the bus stop is.
Well, Adam says the bus stop is at the intersection. I think regardless, a conversation with the school district will unveil all said things about where they stop and how often they stop and how many kids they stop and whether they go up the top of a hill or not. But we've got to have an answer to this because I personally, I think I speak for the board saying the volume of people coming here, even if it's finite, was meaningful enough to make us pause. And I know you're obviously trying to advocate for your client. We appreciate that. I'm sure they appreciate that. So is there anything more? I mean, Jason, if you want a final comment, but I think that's where we are.
I don't know that we have well, I mean, so the concern is the timing or the location?
All of the above. I'm going to paraphrase what we've been saying, which is commercial trucks are coming and going at the same time that kids are getting on a bus. And that feels like an unsafe situation. Sounds like a recipe for lots of traffic and things happening simultaneously. And I guess I'm just going to say to you, being more pointed, this board is not going to move in this application tonight, which I know you would like, and you've been taught by the best, and I admire that. We all admire that. Yes, sir.
I have a comment.
Please.
Just a suggestion. Obviously, there's concern regarding the bus, the traffic, the kids. Would it be possible just to reach out to the school district, get specifics, what times, where, and then basically feed that information to us? I mean, to me, I think it's a matter of a phone call.
I think that's where we are.
I mean, it'd be nice to know exactly. They probably stop right in the middle of the roadway, the center line of Mountain Brook, more than likely. What times they do it in the morning, there should be 2 routes, and 2 routes in the afternoon.
Well, again, I just want to repeat what Steve told us earlier, which is not our job to problem solve it, which I appreciate from Steve. It's the applicant's responsibility to come back to us with a mitigation based upon that evidence. So, again, if there's nothing else, anyone? Jason, hopefully it's clear. Go ahead.
If we moved it back to the south, if we moved it to the south, would that?
Well, I think that was the original proposal, but the soup said he didn't like that move. So look.
Yeah, he also said that the location that we have is going to be safest for the bus traffic.
He said if there were. Look, and I don't want to go back and forth too much more. He said stop signs would be necessary to mitigate it.
I don't believe he said that. I mean,
Okay. One possible consideration may be to install stop signs, painted stop bars on all approach to the Mountain Brook intersection. Such traffic control measures should serve to create a safer environment for all users of the roadway. It could also establish a safe location for school bus pickups and drop-offs. I mean, it's literally, I just read it to you. And again, what Steve is saying to us, which I appreciate, is that we don't have to go forward until you come back with a plan that puts that in place. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, and
our plan is going to be to move the intersection. It's going to be to move the driveway.
I don't know what more to say at this point.
Well, they can move the driveway if the highway super, or if you have a traffic engineer, comes back and says, you move it here, you address the issue at the intersection, and you know what, the site distances aren't all that bad. If you can come back to the board with proof like that, and I don't see that there would be a problem. I mean, there may be some bells and whistles depending on where you put it, but I mean, that may be a fix. But you're gonna have to go back and figure out what you need to do to address this safety issue.
We can't restrict the timing that they leave.
No, that isn't part of it, though. That's not what Steve's saying.
You want to avoid that. In order to avoid that, come up with a fix for the roadway.
Right.
again, I think Steve keeps saying we don't have to problem solve this, but go ahead, if you.
I'm just curious, did you get a copy of this letter with this information? Oh, okay, because it says it right there.
Well, it says, second to last paragraph.
I'm just curious, because I don't see that you were CC'd on it, and it was addressed to Neil and the board members, so.
Dennis, you're usually not the comedy one on this board, but that was pretty funny. All right, I think we've reached the point where I don't think we're having any more productive conversations. So I'm going to suggest that Jason, you work with Ron, Ron offline, and I'm going to move on the agenda. Unless any board member would like to stay on this topic. Heidi, please.
Ask, Jason, are you worried about getting delayed till the next meeting? Is that?
I don't know, I don't see what, there's clearly a perceived conflict, and it's gonna be morning traffic.
Can you hear him, Celia? Jason, you have to get back to the mic, please.
It's morning traffic. I don't know, regardless of where the intersection, I mean, I don't know what we could do. I mean, we could put the traffic, I mean,
With all due respect.
the stop signs, it doesn't seem like the stop signs are gonna.
But what if the bus stop was on the opposite side of the street and you just had all the traffic come out? If you went in your picture, if the bus stop is on the western side of the street and all the traffic came out to the south and you just agreed all our trucks will always go to the south, or the opposite if it's the opposite, to avoid the kids, you could that seems like that would solve the problem. Then no kids would get run down. You just have all the commercial vehicles exit the property to the left. Or something like that.
We'll get some more information.
Yeah, as Steve said, and I keep repeating what Steve said, we're not here we don't need a problem solve as a board. I think we're all playing really good amateur traffic engineers here. Yeah. So let's move on. I think Jason's got it, and professionals like Ron and the soup can work on that. Okay. 3622 Route 9 LLC. Ron, take us through what we got to do on this one.
A year ago, last October, the board approved, granted site plan approval to the original project that was proposed for the site. Very recently, the owner of the property has been approached by another entity that proposes to purchase the property and do I think a similar but different concept for the same site. The original approval from a year ago required that or conditioned the approval on receipt of a DOT highway work permit. And now with the prospect of a new purchaser of the property requiring slightly different improvements that would necessitate a new site plan approval, the applicant just proposes to get the original site plan drawings approved without the requirement to get a DOT permit. At last month's meeting, the board directed that we prepare an amended site plan resolution to acknowledge that whole series of events, to permit the owner to secure his site plan approval, but acknowledge that the DOT permit need only be a condition of the building department building permit phase. So you've got an amended approval that serves to do that. It acknowledges all the facts that I've tried to describe. And so he's hopeful that the board will act on that amended approval to allow him to get the original approval drawing signed. And later today, the next item on your agenda is going to be a discussion of the new applicant's application for that same property.
Steve, anything to add on that?
No, I think we went over this last month, and the board was in favor of making the change. It's just a matter of adopting the resolution.
Comments from the board? No? Motion to adopt the amended site plan?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Dennis and Laura second. Any comments, questions, discussions? No, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay, great. Okay, so, Mr. Dane, let's hear what you want to do with this property. Something to do with lumber, I'm guessing?
That's a good guess. Good evening. Adam Thyberg from Insight Engineering Surveying, Landscape Architecture PC, here representing the applicant, Danes Lumber. I'm also joined, as some of you may know, by the applicants, James and Jeff Dane of Danes Lumber. This is an amended site plan for 3622 Route 9. Per the discussion that was just had, the board will obviously recall the site plan that was approved in October of last year. The submission that's before you today is somewhat preliminary with the intent of gaining feedback and input from the board and your consultants. The engineering of the stormwater will have to be developed and refined. We'll be taking another look at the utilities and so on. As you can see from the plans, and as was mentioned, this is a very similar layout and proposal to what was approved last year, with a few minor deviations, which will include, one, the fact that this project will be constructed over 2 phases. So phase 1 would include the 7,000 square foot storage building that you see at the rear of the property, the outdoor storage area that you see here, the DOT approved driveway entrances would be installed as part of the first phase of work. And during that first phase, the existing building would remain and would be rented for residential use. In phase 2, the existing building would be removed. The 10,500 square foot building would be constructed, which you see in the front of the site, which would include additional storage and a retail space. Other of the minor departures from the original site plan include though the buildings are still in design, it's in process and somewhat in flux, as shown, they are significantly smaller than the ones from the original site plan. There is a somewhat different use. So previously, the site plan had been contemplated as contractor offices and storage. There is still storage with this proposal, but there's also a retail space that's proposed in the front building as part of the phase 2. We have also provided the seeker documents from the original site plan application, the full EAF that was done, the negative declaration. We don't think that this new proposal meets any thresholds or creates any impacts that weren't thoroughly scrutinized in the original site plan application. And we're very happy to be back before your board and look forward to any questions, comments you might have.
So, Ron, you want to just start?
Sure. As described, the proposal is more or less a warehousing operation for the lumber company. They're going to be storing their product there. Could you better explain the purpose of the storage building in the rear under phase 1?
Mm-hmm. I think the idea of the storage space in the rear would be for use by the applicant and their lumber business. The outdoor storage area would be similar. It would be for lumber building type material storage in those areas. And again, the front building would have a storage component with the retail space included. But the storage, if I'm correct, would be primarily for the applicant's existing business.
Could you speak to the issue of the lumber storage? I mean, it's wholesale, retail?
I think that's still somewhat up in the air. I might defer to the owner in terms of their anticipated operations there. If James Dane would want to speak to that.
Hi, I'm James Dane, Vice President of Danes Lumber. So the intention of the rear storage building is mainly going to operate in a wholesale fashion to supplement the Peekskill location, our main retail. That's the extent of it. And this is a very short-term proposal that it's going to take a while to get it up and running for that respect, but it's it's mainly just going to be in a wholesale fashion. So very limited amount of trucks that are going to be coming in for the first few years and just getting it up and running at that point. But it's mainly just.
You're describing it as a wholesale operation under Phase 1.
Correct.
All right,
That's
the-
supplying specifically just our retail location down in Peekskill.
Right.
There's not
And
going to be
the-
any retail out of that.
The code enforcement officer has reviewed that proposal, and they've acknowledged that it fits the definition of warehouse, so it's a permitted use, specifically under the Phase 1 proposal that's being offered. Could you speak to the retail activity that apparently is described in the Phase 2 activity?
That is not necessarily determined at this point. It's in flux. It's a very it's a long-term plan, so we really don't have any definitive use that I can really give you at this point. Long-term being a 3 to 8 year anticipation that can change down the road. So it could be rented out. We could be using it ourselves. It's still in flux. I don't have a definitive answer at this point.
Okay, the only reason that it's raised is that, as I just described, the code enforcement officer acknowledges that the warehouse activity under Phase 1 represents a permitted use pursuant to zoning in that zone. However, that zone does not permit retail activity. So it really, you should be reviewing the code to understand what those proposals for Phase 2 might be and make sure it complies with permitted uses. And as a result, that's why I've identified in that technical memorandum that you really should submit a formal statement of use that describes those activities, and that can get into the issue of use, traffic generation, the standard issues of water supply, wastewater, and the DOT activities.
Yeah, we'll be providing a statement of use with our next submission.
Okay. So at this point, again, the applicant acknowledges that the plans are very preliminary. They don't have typical detail that's included with a full site plan submission. They also acknowledge that they'll be filing a full EAF, which would be necessary just because the original approval that was granted went through the secret process, required a long form or a full EAF. They should follow that same process for the board's records. And they've acknowledged they will do that. So at this point, you may just want to acknowledge receipt of the preliminary plans. It's a matter of determining whether you wish to initiate referrals at this time or await submittal of more detailed plans. The referrals have to go to county planning since it's along Route 9. Should also determine or formally classify it as an unlisted action, and then you can determine if you wish to have a coordinated review. Again, based on the original application that received conditional approval, you went through a coordinated review at that time, so you'd very likely want to continue that process for this latest application.
So, Ron, I'm a little confused, and maybe I'm channeling my fellow Neil, who's not here tonight. It feels like it's a little early in this.
That's what I'm describing, that you may want to await the submittal of more formal plans, full EAF.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm happy to entertain questions from the board, but it feels like there's a lot of things you want to put together, and our viewpoint about things will depend on what you want to do. So Heidi, please.
I have a question, just, for example, are you literally just storing wood there, or are you gonna be treating the wood, sealing it with chemicals, for example? I can't make out exactly what's entailed with the project.
This would be purely storage. There would be no processing or manufacturing or anything of that kind.
Board members have questions at this point, or they'd like to hold off until there's a more formal plan? Yeah, I think, so if that's okay with you and the Danes, I think we should just wait for, maybe Ron offline, you can just guide them a little more firmly into what they want to do.
I've had discussions directly with their design engineer, so he understands the issues we're raising.
So let's consider this, thank you for telling us this, congratulations on your new property, and we look forward to having you have a second operation besides Old Albany Post Road.
Part of the reason to have them on the agenda is just to acknowledge the prior agenda item, to recognize that conditional approval, which warranted amendment, just wanted to reflect the fact that there is a new application coming in for that same property, so.
Okay, well, look, we're here when you come back.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, good night, guys. Any new business? Board members, anyone? None? Hearing none, motion to adjourn? Second, all right, thank you very much. Have a good night, have a good month, see you in November.